Thank you so much. Thank you, Ray. So thank you very much for joining me on the penultimate session, I think it is, for this theatre, penultimate session. And well done for making it to the afternoon of the last day of Event Tech Live. So, using data to predict the future of events. I think just before we start, I just have to give you a bit of background on me. My name's Katie Whatley, and I am the Group Head of Marketing for Explory. I've had over 17 years experience in the events industry. I've run events. I've been leading on marketing for a long time. I've run on some big exhibitions. I've also worked on some very small white glove style content conferences. I've worked on virtual events, all sorts. So I'm coming from a place as an event professional myself. Today I am now Group Head of Marketing at Explory, and data of insights have always helped me as a marketeer build events and develop strategies that make impact. It's helped to fuel the growth on my events and ultimately help me and the teams that I work with deliver better events. Just so you know as well, I have been a client of Explory, I've been a supplier to Explory, and now I'm part of the Explory team. So I know the platform quite well. I know the team very well, and I know data and insights from event professional. So that's a bit of my background. A bit about Explory, not in a pitch form. I'm not the right person to pitch, but we are an event. We are the home of data. Sorry, I'm really not the person to pitch Explory, am I? We are the home of Event Insights. So what are Explory? We're two things. We are a SaaS event technology platform, and we help events teams collect, run surveys, collect data, benchmark their performance. We are also a research agency, so we help answer the bigger questions, and we have a team of research professionals who can dig into some really important issues. So if you're a venue, if you're looking to build a venue, for example, some of our clients do that, or if you're looking to move to a different venue, move to a different timeline, launch a different event, we run bespoke projects for you. Our platform has supported over 4,000 events. I think this is my next slide. Is that working? Yeah, good. Slides are working, step one. We are trusted by some of the leading event professionals in the world and some of the events businesses, whether they're corporates or exhibition organisers. And we have over 4,000 global events that have been measured on our platform. So we really are the home of data and insights. As I said, we're a SaaS platform and we're a research agency. It's about 50-50. So some of our clients run their own research and some of them ask us to do that for them. So getting down to the topic in hand, how do you use data to predict event success? A common challenge that event professionals have, we believe, and what we see from our clients, is an over-reliance on backward-looking data. So lagging indicators. Many organisations fix on data such as revenue or number of attendees. Does that sound about right to people here? I know from my experience as well, what's the percentage growth of attendees? How much revenue have we got? So that gives you a determinate number on how you're doing and how you're performing. But what it neglects to account for is some of the more granular, impact-orientated metrics and external market factors. Essentially, the pitfalls of lagging indicators are a vulnerability to unstable trends, especially nowadays. Over the last couple of years, we've had some really impactful things happen to our world. So how do those macro factors impact your event? And I've just realised that there's somebody very kindly put this slide together for me, and they've got some animation on it. There we go. So to predict the future and to secure the future of your event brand, you need to understand the difference between these lagging indicators, such as revenue and attendance, and predictive or leading indicators to identify and prioritise area for improvements across your customer journey. Predictive and leading indicators look forward and had data points that form basis on forecasting and performance in the future. So I'm just going to break down some of these lagging indicators a little bit further. Let's look at revenue, for example. Let's say you've been hosting an annual event for 4 years and it's been profitable. Maybe you've been having a steady 3% growth year on year, and this year was no different. If your goal was to maintain that trajectory, by all accounts, the event's really successful. Well done, congratulations. But how reliable is this growth? And does the moderate increase in revenue mean that people are happy with your event? And will they keep coming year on year? How resilient is your event to external factors? If something massive impacts your event, you're not going to maintain that trajectory of 3% growth, but can your event brand sustain something else? Can you move into something else? By focusing on lagging indicators, you're just not going to know that. During pandemic, we saw a complete shutdown of live events and save those that were able to pivot to digital, like Event Tech Live. I think they did a lot of digital. Craig, you were involved in that, weren't you? The pandemic forced the world to accept working from home as a viable alternative commuting, and virtual events were pretty redefined the value proposition of many types of events. Appetites and habits around content consumption and business transactions changed. So how do you know if your event is delivering on its promise? If you've moved to a virtual event and you've been tracking lagging indicators such as event attendees and there's no event attendees, that doesn't then translate to the virtual world. It could be the case that people keep coming to your event because they feel like there are no suitable alternatives. I've definitely worked on a brand, I won't name it, many, many years ago, but because that people felt obligated to go. They really just, they didn't like the event, they didn't like the venue, but they came year on year because they felt that everybody else was going. In this case, your event growth is really vulnerable to external market factors, like the emergence of competitors, and actually that's what happened to our event at the time. They didn't like it so much that another competitor was able to swoop in and take over our event just by improving some of the things that perhaps we had become a bit complacent with. So the emergence of competitors, other factors could be restrictions on the ability to host the event in the same format, or alternative channels that might come in and offer the same networking opportunities or commercial opportunities that you offer, but perhaps in a better, more cost-effective way. Ultimately, the easiest way to secure your events future is to keep tabs on why attendees find it impactful and be able to adapt and respond to the shifts in their interest and the ability of other options. So you can do this through tracking a combination of common metrics, namely CSAT. So CSAT refers to customer satisfaction and is typically scored on a 5-point scale. One way to calculate your CSAT score, that's hard to say, CSAT score, is to take the percentage of respondents who give you the top two answers. Another, which Explorer uses, is to generate the average out of 5. CSAT can be analysed together with other metrics like the likelihood to return to develop a more nuanced understanding of your customers. By plotting that on a graph, you'll end up with quadrants, as you can see here, which end up with quadrants that usually depict 4 categories. Within the Apostle framework, and this is a framework we use with our customers on a regular basis, we can see whether their loyalty correlates with the high satisfaction rating or exists in spite of the low satisfaction rating. The framework also provides a good proxy of churn through the disaffected quadrant, those dissatisfied with the event and likelihood to return, and unlikely to return. Leading indicators can give you important insight into whether your event is on the right track and are meeting stakeholders' objectives. Do you measure their objectives? What are their objectives in the first place? But it's important to remember that you can't please everyone, and whether your NPS is good or bad depends on whether it's higher than your stakeholders in their opinions. This is where benchmarking comes in. So benchmarking is something that people who use Explorer say one of our key points, because actually benchmarks allow you to take the broader view of events and data surrounding your events to determine the success and put it in context with previous metrics of the same event. Now, we are an organisation that deals in data and performance, and we hear all the time, yes, we're measuring our overall performance of our event. We get the Net Promoter Score. Does anyone here measure the Net Promoter Score, the NPS? Alex is nodding. And that's a great starting point. But without the context, a Net Promoter Score is just a number. let's say you conducted a post-event feedback survey and had a net promoter score of +10. Is that good? Is that disappointing? How can you judge that and how can you measure that success? Benchmarks give you context and the ability to compare your scores. So rather than saying we got an NPS of +10 versus this is the best NPS that one of our events has ever seen. And that's where you can really compare. So is it just your event year on year? Is it with your event within the context of all the events that you run? Or is it that helps you, benchmarking also helps you look into how your event versus all of those within your sector? So organisation benchmarks, is the event carrying its weight? Oh, I've jumped a few here, sorry. So organisation benchmarks, is the event carrying its weight? Organisation benchmarks are great for those who are working within the corporate event space. Organisation benchmarks allow you to compare the performance of your event based on the wider portfolio. So if you run multiple events and you have a huge portfolio of events, you can see, rather than just an event in its own silo, you can see how it compares with other events within your portfolio. So the comparisons can be used for really fueling your strategic decisions about that event, but also about your whole portfolios and which direction it's going into. So say one of your events is doing really, really well. You can start to see whether it's its own industry, whether it's own sector, or maybe you can share learnings across your events. So if one of your events teams, for example, if you've got multiple events teams, seem to be getting a really high event score and doing really, really well, if you're benchmarking at an organisation level, you can then compare, okay, is it the team? What can we learn from that team? What can we learn from that event? Is it the format? What can we do? And a real knowledge sharing can happen within your own business rather than events teams working in their own silos, or even if you've got one events team, you just do one event and then on to the next event and on to the next event. You can compare events across your portfolio. If it's a customer-facing event, it could potentially damage your brand of your event, reputation of your whole organisation. So if you've got one event that's not doing very well, you know that how it's performing against your other events, and you can make strategic decisions on how you move forward. Let's go on to industry and sector events. I've jumped on my notes, sorry about that. So is the event resilient to the changing market factors? And I think this is one of the things that, again, we really people really value with Explory, because with the Explory platform and using our service, I did say I wasn't going to pitch, but I feel like I'm going into pitch. We can actually benchmark your event across industry and across sectors. So we can provide market data that helps you understand where your event performs against others in the market and how valuable or indispensable your event is compared to other events, but also other events in your sector. So it's critical to be able to appreciate your event data in the context of the wider market. And if you don't prematurely pat yourself on the back, so you don't say, hey, we've run a really good event, this is fabulous, we've got a fabulous NPS score, let's just run it again. In fact, you can say, actually, we're really good compared to this competitor, or we're doing really well in this sector of our audience, our sector of our industry, or we're not doing so well. There's nothing wrong with doing if not having a great event or having an event that needs some work on it, as long as you know you've got some perspective rather than just measuring year on year on year. And the challenges in establishing those industry benchmarks. So as an individual, events tend to not publicise their CSAT scores. It's really hard for event organisers to know where they sit and how they perform. So there's a few ways that you can get that data. How are you performing? And the secret is in the supply chain. So the tech and other suppliers, a lot of them around here, support thousands of events across multiple sectors every year. They're often sitting on a wealth of data, and their databases are growing and replenishing constantly. So for example, if you look at Explory, we've got 4,000 events data. So when you're comparing your event against the events in our database, you're getting those industry benchmarks across a really broad range of events. But there are other event suppliers who can help you do that if you've got, for example, virtual events You might be able to track your success and how people move around your virtual event against other platforms. But it all depends on the platform, and it all depends on how people interact with you. So one of the things we wanted to talk about, I've jumped around on my slides, sorry. If we want to think about benchmarks to be beneficial for your event and your organisation, but you don't know how to start with this, I would encourage you to think about 4 considerations. Are you looking for the indicators that matter? You don't want to waste your time measuring and comparing scores that ultimately aren't important. So you can pick the right indicators. Are you making meaningful comparisons? So you don't want to compare things that are different from the outcome. You also don't want to compare things that are so different from the outcome it doesn't tell you anything. Are you asking questions in a consistent way? There's a risk of methodology issues. Our research team are really, really hot on this. We don't want to change questions year on year so we can't compare. We want to compare apples with apples. Are you comparing the same event type? Are you comparing trade shows, conferences and corporates? Are you comparing the same audiences? You're going to get a very different result from a consumer than you are from a trade show response. In short, you need to get a simple yet rigorous approach that makes sense, and that can be easier said than done. I'm going to go back to one of my event-related KPI slides here. And there are 2 different KPIs that can be useful for events and outcome-related ones. So event KPIs focus on quality and performance of your event. For all of our trade show research, Explore benchmark overall satisfaction with the event, importance of the event, net promoter score, and the likelihood to return. Together, these indicators tell you how your event is working with your target audience and how well it's performing and the outlook for growth. Outcome-related KPIs. So these focus not so much on the event itself, but on what the event is looking to achieve and to what extent it's succeeding. This could be related to behaviours. Are people planning to buy from you? Are they more likely to recommend you? Are they more likely to buy products and services? It can be about their sentiments, how they feel. Are they excited about your product and services? Do they feel like you're a sympathetic company? Do they believe that you have their best interests at heart? And finally, there can be a cognitive element. Where do you want to change and what they know and think about you? The hearts and minds campaigns. Now, there are a lot of things you are kind of interested in, but you can't measure and benchmark everything. You need to be really strict on selecting key performance indicators, and these really do need to be the keys of your success. To make these absolutely clear on is important, you need to start before the benchmarking starts. So you need to really understand what is success for your event, what does that look like for your event, and what questions are you going to ask? What really, really is important to you? When benchmarking, I've jumped a slide. I'm sorry. Let me just skip a bit. Let's talk about comparisons. This is probably my worst session at Event Tech Live in 6 years, you know that? I'm sorry. My notes have been a bit juggled around. So let's talk about meaningful comparisons. We talked about how understanding what success is like and what that measurement of success looks like. But we actually need to talk about what those comparisons are and what you're going to measure. So are you going to measure year on year? We've already talked about that. What does success look like in terms of revenue? But actually, we want to talk about how you're going to compare them across the portfolio. How are you going to compare them against the company and the sector and the industry? There's no point in adding just understanding it as an individual team. You want to really compare that as in its wider context. Portfolio and company benchmarking can be really useful if you run a relatively large number of our events. And so some of our clients in the corporate space run over 1,000 events across the world. So for them, being able to benchmark against within their own internal portfolios are really, really important. It helps you really prioritise the investment. So where do you need to grow your events? Where do you need to, what's working, what isn't working? And it helps you identify best practice when you disseminate them across a wider company. If you understand how well you're performing in comparison to others in the same sector, for example, in retail events or financial services sector, that can give you that information. That will also give you information to how your event's competitive position is in the market and the likelihood of the future trajectory. So if you're looking for a steep growth in your event, it might be that the market in itself isn't doing that, or it might be that actually other events in your sector are having that steep growth, but you're not. And you need to know that, rather than just knowing that you're getting that 3% year on year on growth. So there are some pitfalls. You want to make sure that you're answering questions and asking questions in the right way. It's been well documented in the way that questions influences the results you get. We've definitely seen some surveys, and I'm sure that you guys have seen surveys in your time where you know what answer they want you to have, they want you to give. So one of the surveys, for example, the measurement of likelihood to return, as how likely are you looking to attend this event next time, with answers on a 5-point scale. And another survey asks, we'd love to see you again, will you be joining us next time, with yes, no answers. There's no way of comparison. They're completely different questions, really, and one is leading you down a certain answer. Part of the puzzle is to use a constant rating scales, which is something that we cover in a separate area of our business. And we talk about it on a course that we run with the PCMA and on event management and ensuring data quality. But besides having consistent scales, it's crucial to use the same wording every time. So even across your whole event portfolios, make sure you're asking the same questions in the same way so that you can effectively benchmark and across your portfolio. Try and pick wording that will work for all of your events and stick to it. You're likely to get pushback from people internally who will want to tinker with the questions and change them from their events. But actually having consistency will allow you to really, really set up that measurement, and not just for 1 year, but for year on year on year on year. And you can really, really measure your trajectory. I'm just going to say one thing before we finish on external factors. So be aware of external factors. There are a number of external factors that can sway how your audience feel and behave. COVID is a really good example of that. One thing that we saw when we came back from events, we did a session with a big analysis on the first 300 events back. And what we saw is a really, really positive event score. We saw that people were really, really keen to come back to events. There was a real trigger in, yay, live events are back. You have to be careful with those sort of scores. Take them with a huge pinch of salt, because people were really pleased to be back to live events. People were really pleased to see people in person. But is that going to be the same year on year? You have to take these anomalies out, and you have to be aware of these external factors. The geopolitical situation in Ukraine and changes in the wider business environment, and changes in your sector and industry. You have to have ear to the ground, and just be aware of that in your overall positioning of results. We have lots more videos on this, lots more training in how to build your surveys and what to look for in your surveys. We've run a course with the PCMA. And actually we can offer 10% discount to anybody who'd like to undertake that course as well. So if you want to come and give me your email address at the end of it, I can send it to you. But these are the sort of things that we talk about at Explory, and we really help measure your success. So that's a bit, sorry I had a bit of a, sorry it's gone a bit, my notes have gone a bit left, right and centre, but I hope that's overall made sense. And hopefully you might have some questions.
It absolutely made sense. Yeah,
no,
not at all.
It's amazing. You just get a couple of slides out of a thing, and it just throws you, doesn't it?
No, absolutely. It was brilliant and really engaging. So thank you very much for it, and thank you for presenting so many times at Event Tech Live over the years as well. So a couple of questions that kind of came in during the course of that. So this one's particularly relevant to people like me who work in outdoorsy type stuff or festival type world.
Yes.
If there isn't kind of access to benchmarking type information, so say in the independent event sector where everyone's a bit closeted and keeps their information very close to their chest, how can you best measure your performance against others? What sort of benchmarking should you be thinking about then?
So I would say knowing what you're trying to measure. So if you're specifically trying to measure yourself against another event, there's ways that I've done it that are pretty old school. So if you want to know size of event, for example, you can look at floor plans or you can look at space. Obviously, you can't do things that on revenue because who knows what's behind the screen. But if you're looking to benchmark against sentiment data or how that event is actually performing, platform, again I'm going into the pitch, but platforms like Explory, we do have data like that, so we can help you benchmark. But if you wanted something that's really specific, are you sort of thinking about growth, or it's all about how you measure success, really, at the end of the day, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I guess the question really is, does Explory and I guess other systems have access to that information across the whole breadth of different types of events, or is it kind of more corporate leaning? How does it kind of work?
I can only speak for Explory, but we come from trade shows, but we do have a breadth across conferences and of all different sizes, and corporate events as well. So we're going into the exhibit market as well, so we can start to measure exhibit success. Amazing,
thank you very much. The next question, how feasible is it to get disaffected customers back once you've lost them? And is it worth the energy trying, or should you just try and find new ones?
Oh, it's always worth trying. I think it's, again, I'm going to use an example. Many years ago, I worked on the London Book Fair, and everybody said that this is pre-Explory existing, that's how long I've been in the industry. Everybody said that they had just had a terrible visitor experience. Our visitors hated our show. And when we got down to it, we changed our post-event survey to start asking some real questions around why that was. So rather than just, do you like London Book Fair? What we did is we changed it to be really get under the skin of what their experience was like. And we spent a lot of time and money as well doing on-site research. And it turns out it was actually quite practical things. So if this is Oz Court, it's been knocked down. So I can say this, the toilets were disgusting. Their actual journey and experience with the pre-event communications was awful. Coming to the event, walking into the event was a terrible experience. They had lots of queues. There's real practical things there. So actually, in quite a short period of time, we were able to change those practical things. The thing that we didn't know at the time, and we actually got burnt from this, is that people felt that they were hostages, and we had a competitor in another country, and when we tried to move venue, that competitor swooped into our previous venue, and we lost a lot of customer at that time. We had to do some quite strategic manoeuvring. So what I would say is the benefits of people understanding your negative and your customers who don't love you is why they don't, and can you change that, and what can you do to grow that in the future? And we did a lot and invested a lot in that, and they're warm leads at the end of the day, aren't they? It's so much easier to take someone from a Whatley to Whatley than bring in cold data. So yeah.
Amazing. What a great answer. Thank you. We've got a couple more minutes. I don't know if anyone has a question in the room at all. If not, we shall allow Katie to escape.
I'm just going to say one thing. There are some of my Explorer teammates in the room. So we've got Mitch, who's the head of customer success, who is much more knowledgeable on the subject than I. If I'd known he was here today, I would probably ask him this question. And Alex and Corinne, who are in the audience as well. So if you've got any questions that are specific to your events, or generally how you collect data, post-event surveys, measuring data, measuring success, do come and grab one of us.
And my final question, aside from chatting to yourself or colleagues now, where can people find out more information about the services you offer?
So on our website is explory.com, but we've also got a lot of really handy guides there as well. Lots of insight, how to benchmark, introductions. We also run a lot of insights programs. So if you want to see how the industries are performing, we run in partnership with UFI as well. UFI and ICE, we've got benchmarking reports, so you can go and see generally how the events industry is looking, how it's performing, and get some advice from there as well.
Awesome stuff. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for joining us for the session, and a round of applause for Katie.
Thank you. We're very kind. Thanks.